Hello, everyone. My name is John Beathan with the Technology Advisory Committee at the Carlsbad Chamber of Commerce, and I am extremely happy to have Brian Koehn here today. And let me just read his short bio, which I really like short bios. Brian's taught me a lot, and in fact, he gave me a gift, which was my tagline on Imagine Podcasting: we help businesses eliminate competition. And it's truly what I believe audio does. So Brian Koehn is a communications strategist who specializes in teaching companies how to sell more effectively by distilling their message and sales process into what he calls communication candy. And he works as an executive coach, sales trainer, and marketing strategist for some of the largest companies in the world. Locally, Brian is the founder and publisher of a Carlsbad-based magazine called Carlsbad Local Leaders, which celebrates local leaders and uplifts the local community. So, Brian, welcome. It's so great to have you.
Thank you, John. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so am I good to get started?
Yeah, so let me share the screen.
Great.
And we're going to talk about.
Great. So are you progressing the slides then?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Good stuff. So, I'm grateful for that little 5-minute break because it was able to help me reflect a little bit and even reflect on the work I do and how I got to this point. And, one of my favorite parts about this particular work of communication candy is helping people be able to express themselves more authentically, yes, but more accurately to the world. One of the most painful experiences that I see people facing in business or even personally is they have some sort of a gift. They have some sort of a unique way of seeing the world. They have some sort of a unique value, but they have no way of communicating it so someone else can see it. And I see that, of course it's happening personally, and of course it's happening professionally. But professionally, the difference between someone who can communicate their value clearly and someone who cannot is exponential. It's the difference between easily succeeding or just grinding every single day. It's the difference often between being inspired to wake up in the morning or feeling like a drag. It's the difference between feeling like confident when you're writing a proposal or confident when you're going to a sales meeting or nervous. And like, I don't know if they're really going to see it. Like, I know that I can help them. I know that I'm different. I know that I'm special, but everything I'm saying, it looks and sounds like everyone else. One of the things I find is in all these different industries, especially vertical specific industries, people think they're saying different things, but it's just slight variations. And all of them have extremely unique points of view. If they're a successful company, they're unique in some way. And communication candy is all about helping them bring that uniqueness to the table and helping them communicate it in a way that their most ideal clients are just like, yes. And then also it's about being able to communicate in the sales process in a way that works with human nature versus against it. And one of the reasons this is also personal to me is I've felt just a lot of that pain myself of being misunderstood, of having some sort of a gift or unique perspective and not being able to articulate it. Even as a young child, I felt bright as a student, but I wasn't doing that well in school. And I ended up getting diagnosed with ADHD after a school teacher told my mom that there was, something wrong with me and I had to go to doctors and get checked out. And, one of the first indications that I had some sort of gift or some sort of additional capability was as a young child, I was working with a psychologist and I looked at him and I was like, "Are you having a bad day?" Because I could see he was pretending to be present with me, but he was like a little off. And he was shocked by that. He noticed it. He mentioned that to my mom. And that was the first indication that there might be something unique about my perspective. But even then it didn't sink in. And I was thought to be, just an average student or something and blah, 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 whatever. But it was painful to feel like I see the world in this vibrant way. In fact, it's so distracting to me that it is ADHD. And it gave me a really strong understanding that people's inner worlds are really dynamic and to not take people so much at face value. So even in sales, I often try to interact with the person who's behind the person that's showing up. So a lot of times you're interacting with a job title or this individual who's like representing a company. But I'm always curious about who's the real person like there, like who am I actually talking to that's like not showing up? That's the more deep, real version of them. And communication candy is all about interacting with that person that's actually really inside versus the person that is we're trying to play a part. So yeah, let's go to the next slide. Just a little intro. Actually, before I get started, ADHD superheroes, yeah, for sure. So where all this came from is I discovered, that pain drove me to want to be understood, want to understand myself, want to be able to communicate my value. I got a chance to understand too at a young age that, man, if you can't communicate your value or if like you can't communicate effectively in this world, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be tough sledding for possibly my whole life. And especially because I wasn't doing that well in school, I needed to find a way to articulate value. So that led me on a path to just reading, I've read over 900 books about communication, leadership, the brain, psychology, and started learning these skills. And I pursued some of the most profound sales and marketing experts in the world and hired them to mentor me one-on-one, or I've been worked on their teams personally and been applying sales and marketing techniques as a salesperson. I've been a top salesperson in multiple companies. I've been a VP of sales and marketing in a successful startup. And I've been consulting some of the largest companies in the world as well, largest of which is a $5 billion global company, which what we tested this year since January, the region that we tested this in, this $5 billion company, is the most successful region in the nation right now. So yeah, it's been going well, but that's how this all got started. And to interact on this topic is, this is really about what's really going on. Oftentimes, the best way to figure out how to communicate with someone else is to go within ourselves and ask ourselves, how would I need to understand this? How would I feel comfortable interacting with this person, et cetera, et cetera? So I'd like to ask the room, when are you most open-minded? How are you feeling when you're open-minded? And what are people around you like?
There are people here.
Yeah. Is this open discussion?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm open-minded when I am in the zone. The zone being when I am in a discussion or with people that I'm very comfortable with, either with this topic or with the people I am very comfortable with. So that is when I feel like I'm in cloud nine and I say things, I share things which I have no clue how it got to my mind.
So the people around you, they're people you would consider peers or people that you have a lot of mutual respect?
People I have more mutual respect.
And you're feeling in the zone.
Yeah.
You're feeling safe, you're feeling inspired, motivated. It's probably a little. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. When I said zone, that's what it means. Yes. Yeah. I am all over. People applaud and say, my goodness, you are awesome today or whatever. And I have no clue how it happened.
It's great. Anyone else?
Well, I like to think I'm open-minded all the time because I'm old and I'm trying to find what's going on in the world and keep up with it. And I love meeting new people. That's why I like the chamber so much. There are new people there all the time, younger people, and I like being with younger people that are exciting and having fun because I like to be excited and have fun.
Excellent.
Myself, I'll say as a podcaster, what I like to do is not talk a whole lot if I'm in a conversation or an interview. And so I typically ask people something like, so what's your story? And then I just shut up. And I put as much of my energy and focus on them, literally listening and seeing and trying to imagine what it's like to walk in their shoes.
I'm a little bit like John in the fact that I like organizing with questions and letting the person talk more, because you are able to engage with them and also learn a little bit more about yourself and them, of course, but it opens the conversation. Plus, I think it's a whole lot of my personal issue with having control of the conversation instead of it being about me and feeling like I'm on, in the limelight or whatever, and I don't like to be. I like putting other people first and having them the opportunity to talk.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah.
When I'm in the moment.
What was that?
When I'm in the moment.
In the moment, present.
I'm
Listening.
not thinking about something I said or something I did or thinking about tomorrow or the next thing that's on my list of things to do. I'm just there.
Yeah. Yeah. And let's contrast that with the normal way of selling, or the normal when we're trying to persuade someone in a business meeting. How is what we're talking about different from even the sales calls you've experienced? We've talked about presence. We've talked about listening. We've talked about making people feel safe. Is that what you're finding, like sales conversations or business idea sharing, or trying to persuade someone to change their mind? Or is that what you're finding it's like out there, or is it different?
It's interesting, this idea, anxiety jumps in when you front load a conversation, right? It's like, I got to call this guy, I got to nail this thing. And all of a sudden the stakes are high and you're anxious, potentially anxious, unless you're one of these sales guys who thrives on this. And I've never been that kind of personality. Do you know what I mean? They're sort of sales guys who, I don't know how you do this. You cold call people and somehow it all works out. I can't do that. I don't know how to cold call people because but anyway, what I'm trying to say succinctly, which is a challenge, is anxiety often results in you get anxious about a call because you're trying to manipulate and envision the outcome, and you're trying to steer it there. Whereas if you're open-minded or just going with it, you can get there, right? But we get keyed up because we want a certain outcome and it's pre-programmed. Okay, I got to nail this, so there it is. If that makes any sense, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. Does. The irony is sometimes you're more successful at the outcome you're wanting if you let go of it. When we're trying to force it, we often reduce open-mindedness in a discussion. Anyone else, any comments on how that might be, what actually makes us feel open-minded might be different to how a lot of people are showing up in business?
I just show up and be myself. That's pretty much it. I try not to I'm a person who overthinks a lot of things. So in many ways, I just don't try to overthink. My mind's always open. That's part of the problem. So for me, I just show up and I'm very much it is what it is. They always say you're not in the business of sales, but you are in the business of sales. However you want to phrase it. I'm a seller. I'm not a seller. I don't really care what those particular labels, but I see it as I am a business. I am providing a service. If you have come to me requesting that service, I will present all of the parameters in which I think it is beneficial for you and will work. And if you like it, great. If you don't, I don't care. That's not like I don't care, but It's my job is to present the options. It's not to make anybody choose anything. It's just to fulfill their request, because there's always something else. There's always another opportunity. So when somebody's coming or wanting to make a sale, for me, I'm just like, I'm only going to do so much convincing. I'm not really in the persuasion game. I will just present the best case scenario. And if that person doesn't absorb that in a way, then, that's fine. I'm okay with that. And I just make sure that I have done my best to present it to that person with all of the available options in a way that they can comprehend and digest. And then they can be their own guide in selecting their own choice. And I have found that to be incredibly effective and significantly less stressful.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Oh, no. I'm just saying that this whole thing, I'm also an ADD or ADHD, whichever, when I was young, and even today, I'm an ADD, and I'm very proud of it. And I personally feel this whole concept of ADD, right? deficit disorder itself is wrong. There's nothing deficit about it. And in sales, many times you just got to go. Sometimes you just got to switch off and then say what you got to say. You are inspired, and maybe people you force your way into and talk to people. That could be how cold calls work sometimes, like Sam said. You need some part of ADD, and if that is what it means to go and get it.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, and I do teach that to sales teams, that sometimes they just have to be able to get distracted. You build a much stronger relationship often when you're distracted with someone.
Interesting. If I may comment, I too have the gift of ADD, and it is a gift.
Yes,
for sure. And I was diagnosed by a shrink, and he put me on amphetamines, and that didn't work because I was clenching my jaw, breaking teeth. It just wasn't working. So as I walked out of his office, I just asked him, for somebody like me with ADD, what's the career path, that's recommended? And he said, ironically, not behind a computer, out and about, talking with people, walking, just being dynamic and physical. So,
yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Are there any neurotypical people in this room? Just out of curiosity. Anyone? Awesome.
So, Alexander, you said something really interesting, which was you're extremely open-minded when you show up to a call, and you're open to the fact that this might not be the right fit for them, which creates higher levels of persuasiveness from you. You're not even trying to be persuasive, but from a behavioral science perspective, when you just let go and you're just neutral, like, I'm just going to share information with you, maybe a fit, may not be a fit, that's when your prospect is the most open-minded. So you're using pretty advanced persuasion techniques just by being yourself. So it's fantastic.
When I meet someone, I immediately develop an agenda. What am I going to do with this person? Have I got anything that's going to develop, or is this just a casual meeting? And if I think that I ought to sell them something, I immediately determine whether they're a maybe, a no, or a yes. And if they're a maybe, I got to put them in the back burner, because maybes, the person says, I said maybe, and that's final, because they won't say no. And so you have to develop the yeses. And so I've got an agenda.
Yeah.
So anytime I meet someone, I've got an agenda. And the agenda may be, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah. And that's an extremely valuable sales tip is, know your audience. And don't try to persuade people that are just hard to persuade. Just work with people who you naturally click with.
Yeah.
It's like life's too short. Business can be really hard or it can be really easy. If we're trying to change people to become our clients that just aren't really our clients, they're going to be annoying the whole time. So yeah, that's really good feedback. Let's go to the next slide, John. Yeah. So what we talked about, if your mind is relaxed and open, your prospects will be as well. There's something called mirror neurons in our brain. And it's the same thing that makes us, like, if somebody yawns, all of a sudden you yawn. Those mirror neurons fire very specifically, where you can pick up on others' emotional states. They can pick up on yours. When you're in a relaxed place, it puts them in a relaxed place. When you're stressed and anxious, it makes them stressed and anxious. When you're trying to force something into the conversation, they're feeling that sense of force as well. A person who's anxious is less open-minded to new ideas. So in order to put someone in a state to receive information and be truly open-minded to it, to be persuasive, to be persuaded, they've got to be relaxed. It's the most effective way to get them ready to be persuaded. And also, your confidence and ease demonstrates expertise. Like a brand new doctor out of med school or in med school, they might say, like, you have this and you have this and you have this, and this could be wrong with you, or this could be wrong, or hey, this medication does this and this and this. A really experienced doctor would be like, you know what, I think I can help. And just before how is that impacting you? Okay, and they're very relaxed, and that confidence demonstrates expertise. You can look like an expert even if you're brand new, just by being relaxed and not saying a whole lot and being confident. Next, we want to be curious versus certain. Certainty is often an expression of bias and is less trustworthy. So if we start saying, I know for sure I can help you. Oh, this is the absolute right way to go about this. No question. That lets people know that your brain is a little bit vulnerable to possibly be missing things. You probably have some blind spots. Real experts, the people who are absolutely the best in their fields, the best in terms of sports, medicine, psychology, marketing, technology, they're often some of the most open-minded people. And it's where a mediocre person is going to say, nope, this technology and this is how it works. So this is the right, a real world-class expert is going to say, you know, that's an interesting idea. You know, I'm curious about that. Or, you know, I've thought about that a lot. They're more curious versus certain. If we want to be more persuasive, we have to show up in a more curious way. Let's do our next slide. Which is ironic. A lot of people think that in order to be persuasive, you have to be certain. That turns people off. They resist the certainty. If you're curious, it turns into connection. So are there any words that you've noticed? Let's actually skip this slide. We'll go to the next one. So I was going to go over just some words possibly with the group that may discourage open-mindedness, but it could be words like certainty, or I know this 100%, or I can't be wrong about this. The more effective words, they're neutral words. We say, you know, that might possibly work. Or, hey, could it be maybe that this is happening? Or, you know, I wonder if another way of approaching this could be, or, hey, would it be crazy if we try something like totally different here? Or would it be crazy if we explored like a totally out of the box idea right now? Or has this ever happened before where you were feeling this, or this happened in your business? Or I'm curious if you were to, I see that you feel really strongly about this, and I think that's important. If you were to disagree with yourself on this subject, what do you think you would say? How would you even go about it? Have you considered this? Or ideally, what would you like to see different? Or ideally, what would be the right time? Or ideally, when do you want to see some of these new results in your business? Or might be, you know, this might be a fit for you. I'm not totally sure yet. Those sort of words are much more persuasive than words where you're certain and too confident. Exploratory, curious words. Let's go to the next slide. And then voice. Let's just do a couple little piece of feedback here. What sort of tone and rhythm of voice is happening when ideas are being shared effectively? Kind of like they've been lately in this room.
Well, your voice is very calm, and it's very melodic, and it's very warm, and it's evenly paced, and you're not anxious, and it's flows. So I'm going to listen. I'm like, oh, I'm relaxed. And when I'm relaxed and I'm listening, ooh, you're getting in there, and we're going to have a talk. If your shoulders are up here and all of a sudden you start talking fast and you blah, 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 and all of a sudden it turns into something else, oh, maybe people will put a speed bump on that one. At least that's what I think, but
I totally agree. Yeah. Well,
thank worker, you know, like that's what happens. But anyway.
Also, don't forget the eye contact when you're speaking or when you're discussing something.
Right.
Eye contact with the audience is extremely important.
Yeah. So the voice isn't too anxious or too stressed or too dominating or too passive. A lot of different ways we can use our voice. And I do speak like this on purpose because it is a more persuasive form of communication. And sometimes I surprise people because they can see I can speak a variety of different, and every now and then when people say, hey, Brian's really soft spoken, I say, actually, I'm like this on purpose because I can speak very strongly, but you don't want to listen to me for very long. So it needs to be used in lightly. And you can also speak very weakly. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So
it's actually your technique, because when you are excited about a topic and you know that your audience is wanting to listen, your adrenaline kicks up, and that increases your anxiety, your ability to speak fast and control yourself, especially with ADD type of individual, we tend to take off.
And we do. Let's go to the next slide, John. So relaxed and soft, hypnotic rhythm is much more persuasive. We're not actually trying to hypnotize people. We're just trying to get their brain in a relaxed place. If we're anxious, if someone else is anxious, if they're feeling defensive or like there's some sort of a debate or they're unsafe, their brain is not in a place where it's willing to receive new ideas. They're in defense mode. And we want to speak lower and slower at the end of sentences to be more persuasive, kind of like that. Where sometimes people make a mistake, especially when when people can be insecure in conversation, or I see this with a lot of new salespeople or with cold calls. They're like, "Hey, how are you today?" And they're going up at the end of their sentences because they're just trying to like appeal to someone to get them to like them, or, "Hey, I'm trying to let you know that I'm friendly and I want to connect." And that tends to be far less persuasive. And as you can see, it's an indication that you're anxious. There's a lot more.
But you don't want to let your sentence tail off, because most people that get lower and slower tail off and you can't hear them.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And sometimes to go lower and slower, you got it. You don't want to tail off in a way that makes it sound too weak. You want to be clearly audible where they can understand what you're saying, and you're being lower and slower to emphasize and to create even more of a open mind versus a closed mind. That's really good stuff.
So Brian, if I may, years ago, I went through NLP, neurolinguistic programming classes, and it was pointed out to me early on that my language pattern has a tendency to be somewhat hypnotic. These aren't the droids you're looking for. And it freaked me out initially because I thought, oh, that's not good or whatever. But I've learned to some degree to be able to make it work for me.
Right. Yeah. And it does. And I can see what they're saying. 100%. Yeah.
Do you find that most effective mostly in sales, just like sales specifically?
Sales, it's anytime the stakes are feeling kind of high. So it could be a one-on-one with the direct report in the company where you've got to have some sort of a feedback conversation. It could be a client that's getting a little bit off track, and it's going to be a little bit more high stakes. And I've got to get someone to see something differently. It's any of those moments where I'm really trying to create some sort of a perception shift in someone else. That's where more of these skills will be turned on.
Do you ever consider, instead of a perception, if you're creating a perception shift, taking their perception and running with that, adjusting to them as opposed to adjusting yourself, and then hoping that that's the tactic that will draw them in?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and sometimes they just have to feel heard, and just listening, like was brought up earlier, and hearing their ideas. And actually, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Socrates had discovered that to be a very persuasive form of communication, where you really let someone run with their ideas and let them lead and let them get everything they want to say out. And you ask them questions. That tends to be one of the most powerful ways of persuading.
Yeah, I was just curious. I would not describe anything I say as hypnotic or relaxed or soft or slow. And I am known for being a fast talker. But typically, I've always just looked at what type of person am I dealing with, and I adjust the presentation accordingly. I bring out that version of myself to appeal to that. I know there are some executives that don't want questions. They just want answers, and they like the straightforward and not necessarily the consideration, different types of things. So I was just curious, kind of like how some of that maybe applies for you or different areas or something like that.
Yeah, certainly.
I'm always upbeat.
I show up in different ways, but I tend to try to be the thing with your energy and how you show up is even your higher energy and your faster pace, it doesn't come off as forceful. I don't feel it pressing against me. So it works really well for you. Whereas some people's faster pace or louder or more aggressive, and not that you're being aggressive, but a more aggressive form of communication, it does feel forceful. But there's something about you, I think it's because it's just so authentic to you that it feels like really, it's engaging and it's interesting and it's dynamic and it's captivating. So I think it's working for you because it's just you're being so you, and it's obvious that it's not you trying to push something like push something out there. It's just you being you. I think that's partly why it's working. And one of the reasons I teach this is because so few people are comfortable being themselves like you are. Like you are extremely unique in that way. Very few people are comfortable being themselves in business. So they end up being so forceful in their conversations that you have to teach them to be lower and slower and use these other forms of speaking, because they can't find a way yet to just be themselves and then be persuasive that way. And does that make sense?
Yes. Do you teach people how to be themselves so then they can naturally be more persuasive? Like, is that more like a preliminary training? So this is the stuff at scale. Yeah, this is just the one-to-many training, but I do a lot of executive coaching and one-on-one sales training where I help salespeople figure out how to bring their actual self to the table, because your actual self is the number one most persuasive thing in the world. You don't have to use as many techniques because they're naturally occurring, just like what you had shared earlier. You're naturally using a lot of high-level persuasion skills by being yourself and just being comfortable in your own skin. That is the most powerful way to persuade. That's not a simple thing to teach in a little like 30-minute segment. So I'm teaching techniques. I'm teaching techniques for the time being. Yeah. Let's keep going.
Next slide. Next slide.
Next slide. We're shifting out of just speaking, and now let's talk about seeing. If it's not visually obvious, it's not true. People have to see directly what you're talking about in like a few seconds. So there was this one really hard concept for this company called Client Point, where they were trying to show how they're changing sales experiences so that it's easier for the customer. It takes a lot of explaining. When we're explaining, we're losing. Not only are we losing people, we're losing the argument. If we can't simplify our idea so that people understand it quickly, we're done. So like this image is very simple. They can just say, look, B2C looks like this, like Amazon on the left looks very clean. When you try to do B2B sales or you interact with it, it looks like this. And everyone goes, oh my gosh, I immediately get it. And we say, that's what we fix. We make B2B feel like B2C. So instead of having to take all this time of explaining your idea and making people bored, and people are only listening to the first couple of bullet points anyway, and then they're off in their own world. We want to use visualizations as much as possible. Try to get your brand into a visual. If you have a big idea of what makes you different than another company or what makes your vantage point special, try to get it in one image so people can go, I see it. It's extraordinarily persuasive. If it's not visually obvious, it's not true.
Brian, do you have examples where